You're listening to Big World Network.
Phineas Frakture and the Princess of Atlantis. Episode 11. Written by Joseph Gatch. Read by Michael Young. The ISS agent laughed and darted out the door to the left. The Kraken men leveled their tridents and began charging them. Fang stretched against his bonds, snapping his teeth. Phineas drew the Tesla rifle that he had built back at the outpost and activated it. Abigail, take Ashira and Milos and go after that guy. Find the king and get reinforcements. William and I will take care of these guys, said Phineas. Go! After the three left, Phineas looked at William. Are you ready for this? Not really, replied William. Any chance that I can go with them? Let's fry some fish, said Phineas, pulling the trigger. Nothing happened. Phineas looked at the gun, and as William sighed. Still charging? Asked William. Yep. Crap. Another yep. The Kraken men's tridents, however, reached their full charge, and they fired in unison at their adversaries. Bolts of energy sizzled past Phineas and William as they dodged, ducked, and threw themselves out of the way. The two remaining Atlanteans did the same, though one was hit square in the chest. Across the room a roar went up as Fang was released, and he barreled towards his meal. The Kraken men's beaks hissed and clacked in their frenzy as they ran forward as well. Phineas reslung the rifle and picked up the trident. His energy charge was almost gone as well, but he fired at the shark men, regardless. The trident's effect was negligible, only slowing the shark men down slightly. The Kraken men reached Phineas just as he fired again, and he had to quickly parry a jab by an opponent's trident. He then smashed the forks down on the top of the Kraken man's head. There was a sickening crunch as the soft cartilage skull collapsed. Phineas grabbed his opponent's trident and threw it to William. There was a shriek of pain, and Phineas whirled to see three Kraken men on top of an Atlantean, tearing into his arm and body with their beaks. Phineas fired his trident once more, knocking them off, but not out. There was another yell, but this time it came from William. Phineas watched horrified as Fang knocked his friend to the door, snapping his jaws in William's face. Ashira led the chase through the palace, knowing it better than Abigail. They took a roundabout way, back out the main doors, racing through rooms and taking shortcuts, and eventually came out in front of the ISS agent. He slid to a stop when he saw them standing in the corridor, blocking his way. You dare to sully these great halls with scientific abominations! Unwanted guest! Home invader! Murderer! Shouted Ashira. Abominations! Have you looked in the mirror lately? You're fish people! You have no rights under our laws. You're just things, he sneered. These people are more human than you are, said Abigail. They evolved down here, unlike the creatures that you brought. They have more rights than you and I do. Not in the eyes of the government. And these mer-people are freaks of nature. Abominations, as you say, princess. You are less than human, and should be subjugated under our control. Funny, said Abigail. I thought slavery was abolished after the rise of the automaton. Check your history. It was never abolished. It just faded away. If there was ever a need for it again, I'm sure we could justify it. You sicken me, spat Abigail. You will thank me when we win the war. Milos, who had been inching his way forward, as the others were exchanging words, suddenly pounced towards the ISS agent. But as fast as Milos was, the agent was faster in drawing a revolver and firing. The Atlantean collapsed to the floor and lay unmoving. Milos! Both Abigail and Ashira yelled. Ashira quickly moved to her cousin's side, and as the agent was temporarily distracted, Abigail lunged. You bastard! Abigail's fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling unconscious. She turned towards the princess after relieving the agent of his weapon. Is he all right? Ashira looked up with tears in her eyes. She cradled her cousin's head in her lap, rocking gently. She was barely able to shake her head. No. The Princess of Atlantis wailed a mournful cry, echoing throughout the halls of the palace. Phineas heard a scream of pain. However, it wasn't human. Then there was a roar unlike anything he had heard before. The Sharkman was suddenly heaved into the air to crash to the ground several yards away from William. Phineas looked on as his friend slowly stood up. William's shirt and pants began ripping at the seams, and his body tensed and bulged. His skin turned ashen, and veins popped out as his muscles strained against his skin. William let out another roar and began tearing into the Kraken men with his bare hands. Mutation battled mutation as William's dolomite malady took hold of his person. Phineas watched, helpless and aghast at what his friend had become. William seemed to have grown an additional foot in height. His hands were like clubs as he swatted the Kraken man across the room. The shark man tried to get up, but his broken body resisted. William stomped on him, finishing the beast off. When all the Kraken men were defeated, William turned his attention toward Phineas. The professor stood motionless as his friend circled him like a predator stalking his prey. Phineas heard a ping from behind him, and cautiously he withdrew his Tesla rifle. "William, can you hear me? It's Phineas, your friend, your employer, the one who gives you pastries in the morning. Do you recognize me?" William growled and kept circling. "Listen, I don't want to hurt you. I know you're in there somewhere. Fight it, man. You're better than this. You can beat this. I know you can. Try calming down. Think rationally." William's muscles rippled as he moved. If he hit Phineas, the damage would be severe. He wasn't as slow and lumbering as a full-fledged dolomite. On the contrary, he had an agility that made him more dangerous than his predecessors. Phineas stared into William's eyes, trying to connect with the man inside the beast. That's when William rushed forward. Without hesitation, Phineas pulled the trigger. William was surrounded by an arc of electricity. He howled in pain as he fought the charge. One step, another. He fell to his knees, still struggling to press forward. Then he collapsed. Phineas dropped the rifle, and then he himself dropped to his knees as well, sobbing. Abigail, with one hand on Milos' shoulder and the other on Ashira's, looked up as she heard several loud noises coming from the throne room. A deathly silence followed, unnerving her. Something, she knew, was wrong. "Will you be all right here?" Abigail asked. Ashira nodded and went back to cradling her cousin. Although she knew her infatuation with Milos was purely chemical in nature, Abigail had grown attached to the friendly Atlantean, and it pained her to see Ashira suffer like this. She vowed that she would do everything in her power to let people know what was going on down here, and that the government was involved in it. Abigail found her way back into the throne room. The carnage inside was unbelievable. Kraken men body parts were everywhere. The shark man lay on the floor, twitching as nerves continued to fire post-mortem. In the center of it, Phineas was kneeling on the floor with his head hung low. "Phineas," Abigail said softly, "where's William?" Phineas was silent for a long moment. Don't look. William is—" He was cut off by a moan from a few feet away. "William!" shouted Abigail as their friend sat up. Phineas hurriedly looked over and was surprised and relieved to see that William had returned to normal. Abigail bent down and helped him to his feet. "My God, what happened to you?" William looked down at his torn clothes, which were blackening and smoking in some areas. "Last thing I remember was the shark thing jumping on me. Why are my clothes smoking?" He looked over at Phineas, who was sliding his rifle behind him. "You shot me! I can't believe it! Why would you do such a thing?" "Well, you got in the way," Phineas lied. "I could have been killed. Of all the rotten, low, inconsiderate— Oh!" "You're fine," said Phineas, before turning to Abigail. "Did you get that guy?" "Oh, yes, I got him," Abigail responded, rubbing her knuckles. "But Milos was shot. He's dead." Both Phineas and William looked at her in shock and disbelief. "Ashira is with him. She really needs some comforting right now." Phineas stood up. "I'll go see her. We need to deal with that guy, too." After he left the room, Abigail looked around at the mess. "What happened here? And where did the other ministers get off to?" "I don't know," said William. "I haven't seen them since we came into the palace." "I'm sure they'll turn up somewhere. Let's go help Phineas. I'm not sure that he's the best choice to give sympathy. Wow, you really look like hell." "You're such a sweet talker," William said as he limped out of the throne room with Abigail supporting him. Phineas found Ashira, still clinging to Milos and oblivious to all around her. As he approached, the ISS agent began to stir. Phineas knocked him in the head with his rifle butt, sending him back into unconsciousness, and kept walking. When he reached the princess, he knelt down and awkwardly tried to give her a hug. Ashira quickly put her arms around him and cried into his shoulder. Phineas wasn't sure what to do, but the pheromones that she exuded caused him to fall into her embrace. Suddenly Ashira said, "Oh, Father!" Phineas looked down puzzled. "No, Princess, it's Phineas." Louder again she said, "Father!" and released Phineas from her grip, standing up. Phineas stood as well, but held on to the princess. Then he turned around and looked up at the most imposing men he had ever seen. He glanced down at Phineas, and Ashira smiled broadly. Hello, sir," Phineas said meekly. "I believe that this belongs to you."
You're listening to Big World Network.